Well, I hate it when things go to waste. And a couple of years ago, actually pre-pandemic, I put together a presentation for a client that eventually fell through. So I guess that's your game. I get to share it with all of you. And the content that I had was around dealing with change primarily, but in relation to automation. And so I titled this, "Will Robots Take My Job?" Now, as many of you know, I work in the healthcare industry, mostly healthcare analytics, and this presentation is sort of skewed towards jobs in the healthcare space, specifically medical records and health information. But I think it'll fit for anybody that's in different industries where they have maybe similar jobs to record keeping and billing. It'll probably fit well. So let's dive right in. I am going to start with a message saying don't kill the messenger on this. I have bad news in the beginning, but if you wait for it at the end, you'll hear the good news. If you want to follow along, the source for some of my information around automation of jobs comes from a website called willrobotstakemyjob.com, and it's recently been updated, at least since the last time I created this slide deck. It's on there. And then The Future of Employment, How Susceptible Are Jobs to Computerization by Carl Benedict Frey. So you can check out that article as well. So don't kill the messenger. I do have good news at the end. I'll start off with a couple of jobs that I look at in health and medicine that are ripe for automation. And one of them is medical record specialists. And the website said that this had a 92% of being automated. You'll notice a couple themes in these jobs. The growth tends to be pretty low, and as well as the wages fairly low. And if you really think about the job itself, what it entails, it is ripe for automation. There are copy and paste tasks involved. There's very little decision making, human decision making, and so it is ripe for automation. The next one that I looked at was billing and posting clerks, and not only had a very low job score, but same thing, high level of risk for automation, very low growth, and low wages as well. So they start to share a common theme. Now let's look at one where the job growth is higher, but also the risk automation is very low, and you'll see that the score is high here. The automation risk is only 6%. It has 32.5% growth, and the wages are fairly high. If you really think about this job, it's not just managers in the traditional sense about how you think about it, but when we're talking about automation, we're also thinking about, well, how are these automated tasks going to be managed? How will they be maintained? How will they be updated as changes occur in a process or in a system? And that's where I think that management piece is going to fit in. It might not be the traditional management role that we've thought about. Then there are some jobs where the automation risk is quite low, and they also share a common theme. Now, these are not just healthcare related jobs. These are jobs and roles across industries, but you will know some common themes here. They have to do with patient to professional medical positions like occupational therapists, physical medicine, bedside care, exercise physiologists, more clinical jobs, recreational therapy, which happens to be what my job does. My wife does. You'll also notice that there's music and there's art in here, something that is very difficult to automate or near impossible at this point. And then education roles. There's 2 of those in this list. Okay, so these are the jobs that are safe from automation according to the website. So now I want to talk a little bit about history. What has history told us? Because again, this isn't all doom and gloom. About I want to think of automation is really disruption, right? And so when we think about that, we can look at things like the horse and carriage and how that became the automobile. And in this case, we're going to talk about the horse and carriage compared to the Model T and the industries that were generated off the Model T. So we didn't have a need for gasoline. Now we have a very robust oil and gas industry. We didn't need rubber tires, right? And now having tires and having an aluminum or metal wheel is important and needed. We also didn't have the infrastructure. There was no interstate system. There were no roads and highways in the way that we think about them today with asphalt and concrete. Okay, now there's those new industries that spawn, but then there's also the loss in jobs. And so let's focus on the horse and carriage for a minute and talk about those jobs. Obviously, the carriage makers lost their jobs, At one point, if I remember the number correctly, there was something like 2,400 carriage companies in the United States that actually made carriages. That's an incredible number to think about. Then you had the breeders and the trainers of the horses, the saddle makers, the horseshoe repair folks. All of those experienced job loss, slowly in the beginning and then escalating as the car became a ubiquitous part of American culture, right? And so there was an economic boom. There was a raise in wages as there started to be more and more car manufacturers. There was also a reduction in cost, which is real interesting. The very first cars that were made in a non-inflation adjusted number cost about $1,000 back in the early 1900s. And as Ford developed the assembly line and was able to create a car efficiently or build a car efficiently, those costs got down to about $230 for a new car. Again, not inflation adjusted, just the raw number. There was also, like I mentioned before, new industries created, but there's one I didn't mention, and that new industry has to do with ski resorts. This was not a thing. This didn't exist. Maybe people were skiing, maybe they're doing cross-country skiing, but they weren't doing it the way that we envision or think about ski resorts today. The infrastructure simply wasn't there. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and we used to go skiing in the Cascade Mountains. I couldn't imagine trying to get there in a horse and carriage. It'd be weird. Plus there are mountain passes, but not the infrastructure for a mountain pass the way that you think about them today, especially with the ability to remove snow and lay down salt and gravel and all of that. So this spawned a whole new industry. And the main takeaway that I want you to have is to think about what is the next industry that will be created from this level of automation. If you want more recent examples, you can think about the personal computer, the cell phone, and the internet. Now, there was job loss and all of that. There was about 3.2 million jobs that were lost. This is according to McKinsey, mostly typists and secretaries. Now that somebody could have a computer on your desk, you don't need somebody to type anything for you. You're carrying your phone around with you all the time. You don't necessarily need a secretary. So those jobs were lost. But it created about 19 million jobs in the process. Think about hardware manufacturing, semiconductor software developers, and a whole service industry around computers and the internet. Again, this is another report from McKinsey. So a net gain of about 15.8 million jobs. Now this goes through a really interesting cycle where there's this demand in consumption of goods and services that increases the production and productivity, and then therefore increases the amount of income that is distributed as wages, and then the tax base. So where do we go from here? What's sort of the next thing to think about? Well, we can focus on jobs that are unlikely to be automated. And I said this is kind of a no-brainer thing to think about, right? But sometimes we don't think through it. So what jobs are difficult to automate? And we looked at ones that were low risk. Education, those hands-on personal experiences in healthcare, those are things that are difficult to automate. The arts and music, not easy to automate. I want you to forget a little bit about the buzzwords like AI, ML, data science, and I come from that background, but they've really been taken over by companies. I even posted on my LinkedIn page about companies just throwing in AI every time they have a slide deck together. So that has sort of lost its meaning at this point. What we really need to think about is that automation piece and where we won't see a job being automated out and focus on that. Be like the ski industry. So take that ski industry example. If we can really forecast forward or think ahead to what might be created in this automation process, or even possibly from some of the other analytical components or machine learning components that we have. The last thing I want you to think about, and this is really when I originally built this for one of my clients, was to talk about pivoting. And so when a company sort of hits a space where their current business model, their current product, service, whatever it is sort of seeing a dead end, where are we going to pivot to? And I want to give you 3 examples that may not be apparent from history that are really interesting. The first one is around Western Union. They started out as a telegram company and then pivoted to money wiring, which they still do today, and they've continued to pivot into other areas as well. Think about Nintendo. A lot of people don't know Nintendo was more than just the Switch or the Wii. They started out as a Japanese playing card manufacturer. And the last one I want you to focus on is Nokia. This one, I had no idea that Nokia started out as a paper mill. They were not a cell phone manufacturer at first. So that's a really interesting, like, complete, 180. So think about how you may have to pivot, not just in your job, which you watching this video might be something that you have to think about, is if I'm in one of those jobs likely to be automated, where am I going to pivot to next? Where's the next step in my career where I need to get out ahead of it? My personal experience, I did that when I was working in one very specific part of healthcare, and then decided to get into analytics, machine learning, data science, all that fun stuff. And I could sort of envision where things were heading, and that was the pivot that I made. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. I love doing these videos that are not necessarily looking at Alteryx and Power BI and all of the wonderful technology, but just fun things to sort of talk about. So I'd love to hear your comments. Am I on? Am I crazy? Is this wild? Where do you think we're going to pivot to? What other jobs do you see being either automated or saved from automation? So leave your comments below, and I try to reply. So I hope I can answer some questions and get a conversation going. All right, that's it for now. I will catch you on the next one.